Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Awakening Adventures, where we will hear real stories from actual real people who've had their spiritual awakenings and what they were guided to do with their new awareness. My name is Venus Castleberg, also known as the Home Whisperer, where I use my gifts to help real estate agents clear the energy from stuck homes so that they can sell with greater ease. My guest today, I've actually had him on one of my other shows before, and I'm so glad to have an encore with Lainhart. Once a student of grief, loss, tragedy, and trauma, today a teacher of aspiration, inspiration, rehabilitation, and transformation. And that is so true. This man wears his heart on his sleeve and is just here to serve. And I'm really, really honored to have you on the show again, Marc. Welcome.
Well, thank you, my friend. Good to see you again. Happy New Year. 2026, the year of the horse. Buckle up.
That, that's awesome. I love that you started with that. Would you tell us a little bit about what is the year of the horse? What does that mean?
Yeah, so from you can approach this from many different, tools from astrology to numerology. So I always like to equate years based on the numerology scale. So, last year was 2025, which is the year of the nine in numerology, which means completion. It's also known as the year of the snake. So it was about clearing old ways, just like a snake loses its skin, getting rid of things that don't serve your path, and then restart back over in the year of the one. So numerology, you go one through nine, and then you start over. So we're in 2026, and if you just add the numbers up, that'll add up to 10, and then one plus zero becomes one. So it's known as the year of the one, or the new beginnings, the year of starting. But then you add astrology to it, and then it becomes the year of the horse. So it really comes in from a horse standpoint. The power of a horse can be very, very aggressive, but horses can be very gentle. And as we've already seen in 2026, we've come into 2026 with a lot of aggression, a lot of things worldwide going on. And it's like, just get on the saddle, buckle up, saddle up, if you will, and hold on, because the horse is going to take us and clear some paths and bring some truth to our reality that some people will be accepting of, and other people will be, what the heck is going on? And we're already seeing that. I mean, just, we're only what, 9 days into it. So it's like, but I always like to say that last year clears the way, the snake clears the way, the horse now leads the way. So it's a year of leading and really taking in new opportunities, new experiences, really going after the things that you want in life and starting with that new cycle. And then we'll go through the same cycle and for another 8 years until we get to another 9 year, and then everything repeats over, just like, the seasons, the fall, the winter, the spring, the summer. It's the same thing with numbers, and we as humans equate everything to numbers. So, it's a journey.
That's awesome. Yeah. I actually really was very grateful that that 9 year was over. I was like, okay, I feel like there was some stuff that needed to get complete, and now it's like, okay, a fresh start, something new.
Was the year of the nine your so if you take your date of birth for your listeners and followers, you can take your date of birth and add those up to a number to get to your numerology number. So sometimes when you're in your year, so for example, 2 years ago was my year of the eight, and it can be a very great year in your numerology year, but it can also be a very like transformative, like WTF kind of year. Like, where am I going with this? So I'm just curious if last year was your year of the nine based on your date of birth.
Yeah, no, last year I was in 13/4. Yeah, 13/4. I was in my death year. I was in a death year. So,
That would equate though. Death year
yeah.
also is an ending,
Yeah.
nine completion. So that would make sense. And sometimes we have to let go, you
Yeah.
know, or die in order to be reborn or rebirthed, if you will. So that would make sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I was paying attention to all that. I was like, wow, it feels very right on point. Um, but I feel like I handled it with grace. Um, so, but I'm curious because we'll talk about kind of like how you all awakened and all that stuff. But I'm curious, when did you get into numerology and astrology? Was that something you picked up right away, or is that something that just came later?
No, that actually, so over the time, it's one of the tools that I picked up in my, what I like to equate to my spiritual toolbox. And I kind of always break it down in the awakening process that when you awaken, it might be the one thing that gets you to change your perception of who you are, your life. And over along the way, you can pick up different modalities, different educational tools to add into your toolbox. Just I always equate it like, a surgeon has certain tools that they can reach to pay, based on the surgery they're doing. Or if you're a lawyer, there are different parts of the law that you can reach into to argue what your case is, or a plumber or a carpenter, reaches for what the job is. You get that tool to handle the job. And I would say when I first came into this almost 2 decades ago, I was 27. Um, it had none of those tools. It was not. This is not something that I thought I'd ever be doing, to be honest with you, Venus. It's not something that I raised my hand to do. It was something that was called for me to do, and it took me a few years of, self-identification, self-sabotage, like what is going on, and you said the word death. It comes from great traumas and tragedies that I had at the age of 27, which I now talk about today as the TNT that blew my life up. Just like dynamite blows up stuff and rechanges things, these traumas and tragedies really kind of changed my mindset. Even to the depth of like even the neuroplasticity within my brain. I look back at it now and go, those traumatic events with the loss of my brothers in the same week to murder and brain cancer did something in my mind, which we call neuroplasticity, which is a rewiring of the brain to rewire how you see things. And so my awakening process was pretty dark. It was pretty deep. It wasn't this, kumbaya moment. It wasn't, kitty cats and cupcakes and rainbows. And no, it was actually quite opposite, because I was dealing with murder and cancer and multiple sclerosis in my family members that I had never, had really thought about. And, it was my first personal experience with death and dying. I had, in a previous life, I was a um, first responder, emergency medicine, firefighter, EMT. And so I dealt professionally with death and dying from, my days in the Coast Guard, from plane crashes to recovery to fires to, all of that. But it never really hit home personally. And at the age of 27, it came home to roost, and it really changed who I am. And it's a big part of who I am and what I do today. But it was not an easy event. And you can look at it from, if you bring in nature to this, what the caterpillar calls the end of the world is it's literally deliquefying into a protein goo sack, only to be revealed through the cocoon that it's a butterfly, where the butterfly goes, this is great. And I got a whole new perspective. That is how I equate the awakening process. And I always remind people, be careful for what you ask for, because you have great power to manifest your heart's desire. And it's just, I didn't know that I would go down a spiritual path from the death and dying of my brothers and father-in-law. And so that was really the opening. And it's from that point on that I really started to explore. That's where the intuitive prospector was born out, because I'm like, okay, there's more to than just what's going on. And I started having communications from my brothers from the other side. And I didn't understand that. How could I be talking to someone that's no longer living in a physical body, but I'm actually getting conversations with them in my mind? And, some people would say, well, that's you're schizophrenic or you're gone crazy. But then the logic side of me was like, well, a crazy person can't self-diagnose themselves. If you've gone crazy, you don't know you've gone crazy, right? And from that point, I started to really prospect to find what was going on with this event that triggered or repurposed my perspective in my brain, and also honored my grief through death of my brothers and my father-in-law. And that's where I started to pick up certain tools. And numerology was one that I came to a few years after my awakening, because I just resonated with numbers, which was fascinating, because I was really a horrible student when it came to math in high school and college. I did not equate to math or statistics, but yet it's a tool that I picked up later in my awakening process. But the one thing I'd say is give yourself a lot of patience, a lot of trust, and a lot of grace in the awakening process, because it is like caterpillar to butterfly, but it's that cocoon that's really going to, challenge you, challenge your status quo, challenge you as a human being, challenge you in your learned behaviors and your belief systems, because you really have to unlearn a lot of stuff that you learned. And I was only 27 at the time, so I wasn't, to middle age yet, but at 27 years of age, you still think you know the world, and you really don't. Science is teaching us you don't really get to, maturity as an adult until you're in your 30s. So yeah, so just be patient and a lot of grace with yourself in transformation and awakening is what I'd say.
You and I were talking a little bit before this, and I'd love to, like you said something specific about the thought of being crazy, because sometimes people are like, okay, I'm going through this spiritual awakening. I feel like I'm going crazy. Would you speak to that a little bit more? Like, would you say to somebody going through that?
Yeah, so we had a fascinating conversation in my development group on Wednesdays. I have a spiritual growth collective group, and we have conversations like this. And somebody had said, "Well, why do people say when you have, when you start to, transform or ascend, or even if we go back before we called it biology, we called it alchemy, the mixing of things to become something bigger." And somebody said, "Well, why do we in society say you must have lost your mind?" And they say it in a way that it has to be such a bad thing. But a lot of the gurus and a lot of, from Aristotle to Plato to Rumi to Lao Tzu always talked about sometimes you need to lose your mind in order to find who you truly are, to know yourself. And losing your mind is also some of the constructs and your perceptions that have built over time. And so losing your mind is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as you're still, within the, being kind and caring and empathetic. And, there is craziness, people that have, mentally lost their mind. But it's just interesting to me, Venus, that we're having more and more conversations about mental health.
Mhm.
Awareness for mental health from, A-list actors to athletes, and how mental health is a big thing. Because I think if you don't address mental health, or you push it down, then that's where you can really lose your mind. But then you lose your way in life, right? And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying sometimes you need to lose your mind and your learned behaviors in order to be open up to this new transition to the butterfly, to that cocoon phase that I'm talking about. And so sometimes it's not bad to admit and say, yeah, maybe I did lose my mind, but I also found myself along the way. And what is the definition of crazy, right? Because I would say there are some people out there right now that are doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. That's what I would call crazy. That's what I'd say losing your mind, right? And
Right.
sometimes you have to step out of that status quo to be like, oh, there's a lot of things that I thought I knew that I really don't know. So,
Mhm. Yeah, totally. Well, thank you for giving us some perspective on that. That's great. So, tell us a little bit about like, I know you mentioned that you were a EMT and you've done some other things, but you were living kind of a normal life and then something changed with one phone call. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
yeah. So, going back to when I was 27, I was in the Coast Guard, and it was just getting out of, I'd been in the Coast Guard for 10 years. So, I was doing a lot of cool stuff, right? I was doing a lot of search and rescue, and a lot of what you see today is what I was doing back in, the late 90s and early 2000s. And then I had gotten out of the service and became a firefighter EMT. And so I was working as in that industry as a first responder. And on a Sunday afternoon, I received a phone call that my little brother Michael had been murdered. And I didn't understand. It took me a second to process the rawness of receiving information. And that goes for anybody in life. You can get a phone call or an email, or somebody knocking on your door that can literally change your life with the delivery of such horrible news. And so, of course, we flew home. I'm in Seattle, so this would be on the east side of the state of Spokane, Washington. And so we flew home right away to be with family and to try to figure out what had happened to my little brother that had been murdered, shot and killed. And then during that time while we were there, 3 days later, my older brother was diagnosed with terminal brain cancer and had to be rushed to the hospital. So I literally went on a Thursday afternoon. So this is Sunday to Thursday. I went Thursday afternoon from loading up my little brother in the back of a hearse after his funeral to going out to the hospital to be told that my older brother was going to die from what's known as glioblastoma or brain cancer. And so those events really upended and really changed the course of my life, because like I said, I dealt with it professionally, but it was hitting home personally. And that was my side of the family. That's not even including my wife's side of the family, where her dad, Don, my father-in-law, had just succumbed to multiple sclerosis at the young age of 47. So we're talking young ages of 21, 35, and 47 between my brothers and my father-in-law. And it really was like, well, shoot, if they can die at that young age, when am I going to die? And I really started questioning my own mortality. And I really started questioning, where is God in all this? Because God didn't show up for me during this time. It was very lonely. It was very silent. And we had a lot of God and I, whatever your version of God is, we had a lot of conversations, and they weren't very polite. There was a lot of curse words in these conversations, and even to the point of like, shoot, strike me down if that's what you want, because why do bad, horrible things happen to good people? And I don't know if there's an answer to that. But then you're like, you start to evolve in your awakening process. And I can look back now at those triggering events. And again, years of therapy and grieving counseling and honoring your grief and knowing what survivor's guilt is, to look back at that to say, this is why I'm here now doing what I do now to help others through loss, through grief, through death and dying, through life after death. And that was a starting point. And so, and I realized through all this that, yeah, they may be dead in the physical body, but they're very much alive in energy and love and their mannerisms, and still can communicate with all of us, not just me, but your loved ones, your animals, I always say your friends, your family, and your fur babies can always come back if you ask. Now, they're not going to come with a big booming voice from the sky. It's through other means that I've learned over time and through the tools that I've collected, which I call the intelligence or spiritual language. Just like learning a new language, you learn a new language working with spirit, and they'll give you the signs, the symbols, the synergies, and the synchronicities. And that really helped with my healing and transformation. And that's why you opened the show with, once a student of grief, loss, tragedy, and trauma. That is true, but that is what made me. But I'm now, today a teacher of aspiration, inspiration, rehabilitation, and transformation because of those experiences, and knowing that I will see them again. And this is not the end. This is all you and I talking right here. This is a temporary matrix. This is a temporary context because, all we have is right now is the present moment.
Right. Yeah, I'm just curious, do you still talk to your brothers? Are your brothers still around, or?
Oh, yeah. In fact, I'll give you a real-time example. So just a few days ago, the anniversary of my older brother, Todd, the one that, made his journey with brain cancer to the other side on January 5th. So just 4 days ago, I did a post in tribute to him to, gone but not forgotten, honoring those that have moved on, but remembering their essence of who they were. And I now know when you set that intention, energy follows intention from a metaphysical standpoint. And I said, Todd, I know you're going to give me signs, symbols, synergies, or synchronicities. And again, it's not going to be this big, we all want this like big booming voice from the sky to be like, hello, Mark, how are you? I'm coming from heaven. I'd love to hear that story from, the experience. But what they'll do is they'll communicate with us through our mind. And people will be like, well, how do they communicate with us through our mind? Because the brain is such an amazing organ, and it's such an amazing computer. And we were talking about this in group. And, even Einstein said this 3.5 pound object in our, it weighs about 3.5 pounds on average, but it's one of the most complex organisms in the universe. And when you realize that the brain can actually be rewired through neuroplasticity, you can access new parts of your brain, or the pineal gland, this is why we call this the third eye, because it's directly connected to the pineal gland, which resides in the center of the brain. We call it the third eye because it looks like an almond-shaped gland, and it's actually in a liquid, just like our retinal. That's why we call it the third eye. But it's interesting because when you start to open up your third eye like a pine cone, you see pine cones when you're in Europe, people have pine cones in front of their houses. That's actually representation of the pineal gland. And so sometimes the pineal gland remains closed for people that don't want to unlock doors and portals to things bigger than themselves. And that's fine. That's free will and choice. But for those of us that start to explore, the pineal gland opens and that evolves. And what happens is you start to communicate through different means through the brain. Like I personally believe in the future, this is primitive. This is a vibration off a vocal cord. Otherwise, you and I aren't really communicating, right? Because without this, there's really no communications. But we know that there are other ways to communicate: sign language, symbology, weather. You can go out and look at the clouds and say, hey, that cloud looks like this, and then it triggers your mind. In fact, when I ask you a question, is your memory really stored in your brain, or is it out here in all these atoms and neurons? And all of a sudden I ask you a question, you're like, oh, I didn't think about that memory. And then all of a sudden it triggers within the brain. So it's like almost like an upload, download of consciousness to something bigger than ourselves. So when you realize that, that's where communication can take place. So going back to the post on the 5th that I posted for my brother, I said, give me some signs. And usually I tell people within 72 hours. It may not be instantaneous. It might not be real time. But if you have awareness, they'll show you through different means of communication. And sure enough, 24 hours after I posted this, I'm just recovering from that sickness and flu that's going around. So I apologize if my voice is a little raspy. But I was, so this has been Tuesday, and I'm at home and I'm like not feeling good, kind of feeling down. And I said, I'm gonna turn on a movie. And I had seen this movie that my mother-in-law had gone to, and she didn't like it. She actually walked out in the middle of it because she didn't really understand it. And I'm like, I want to just check it out and see what it's about. It's called The Life of Chuck, and it's written by Stephen King. And people automatically think Stephen King, oh, it must be a horror movie. Well, no, Stephen King also wrote Stand By Me, right? Great movie. But it's based on the perspective of a gentleman that's going through his life in reverse back to his childhood. And long story short, within the movie, he's suffering from glioblastoma, brain cancer.
Oh, wow.
So within 24 hours, now what are the chances that I'm sick at home? All right, people say, oh, coincidences and synchronicities, but Einstein always equated that to God's way of remaining anonymous, right? And I'm sitting here watching this movie, which I absolutely loved and highly recommend, because it's a great perspective on the weight between life and death. And the gentleman ends up having glioblastoma, and he's actually going back through his life as he's in his coma, getting ready to die. And that's exactly how my brother did. And so that hit home for me. And then I was like, oh, thank you, Todd, for communicating as I asked and invoked to give me that, perspective. And there were some very good diamonds and nuggets within that movie that I ended up sharing with my group on Wednesday, and talking about that, about how the intelligence of the spirit world works if we ask for it and we're aware and open to it to receive. And so that's just one example of real time. And now my next brother coming up on the 23rd, I'll do the same thing. And again, usually within 72 hours, I will get some sort of communication that will remind me of them. And that's just them sometimes simply saying hello. It doesn't have to be this big winded communication, but yes, I still talk with my brothers. It's not as much as I used to when I first started. I end up talking with people I don't know, the people that come to me as a medium, which is, but if you invoke it and you set your intentions, physics tells us that energy follows your own intentions. And then it's usually when you're asked a question that will trigger, not necessarily in the memory of the mind, but the download of, oh, I didn't think about it that way.
That's awesome. I love that. That's great.
A lot
Yeah,
of
I
fun.
mean, if we're willing to ask and then just be open, you can see them everywhere. You can,
Yeah.
yeah.
And an
So,
easy way to do that, Venus, just for practicality, for application to what I'm saying, is I teach my students a very simple phrase: ask, believe, stop and take the divine breath in, because what do we all need to be here in this physical life? We need the breath, right? So take a divine breath in, and then you're going to receive information and you're going to perceive the information that you receive. So ask, believe, divine breath, receive, perceive. If you do that and you give it 3 days from what I'm saying today, within 72 hours, usually, sometimes not always 72, it could be a week later, it could be a month later. But if you do that line that I'm talking about, you'll set the intention, and eventually that intention will lead to an experience that will make you think of the person that you're trying to communicate with. It's quite fascinating.
that's awesome. So, but what I do know is I'm gonna probably over exaggerate, but that's just me. You're world renowned psychic. You've been recognized as a media. So when you're giving readings, I'm just kind of curious. How does it happen for you? What kind of downloads do you get? Are you audible? Are you visual? Are you both? Are you like,
Yeah, that's a great question. It's based on your own development, and everybody's different. And I always tell my students, don't try to emulate somebody, be your own self and develop what we call the clairs. And the clairs are your spiritual tools. We talked about tools earlier, like numerology. The clairs are very similar to a tool that you can put in your spiritual toolbox. Like we all, as human beings, we would all agree in science that we have the main five senses of the human experience. So see it, taste it, touch it, hear it, smell it, right? We would all agree with that. When you awaken and you evolve and you ascend and you use that alchemy that I was talking about, you start to open up your clairs. And the big two clairs that most people on an awakening process will start to have is clairvoyance and clairsentience. And clairvoyance is the ability to see, hear, the third eye. And I teach that we have 3 eyes in life: 2 to look, 1 to see. Because not everything is seen with these eyes. We know that's true right now. The Wi-Fi signal that are connecting you and I, we can't see that Wi-Fi signal. The air that you and I are sharing together and breathing, we don't see that air. The gravity that's keeping us seated in this chair, even though the planet is going at 130,000 miles an hour in space around the sun, but we don't feel that, right? So there's a lot of things that we don't see, but the clairvoyance is the ability to see here. So you may see visions, you may see symbols, you may see somebody that looks like something. Then you have clairsentience, which is the ability to feel, which is the skin, which is the largest organ on the body. right? And so you're using your body with these clairs, and those are just a few of the clairs. We've got clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, which is the ability to hear. There's clairfactoria, which is the ability to smell. Clairgustance, the ability to taste. Claircognizance, which goes down to your belly button, which is your most psychic area because that's your area of where you were connected to your mom, breathing liquid in the womb for 9 months. That's your most psychic area. We call that the solar plexus. But that's also called claircognizance, the sense of just knowing something, but you can't necessarily prove it, right? And so some of this becomes pseudoscience. You can't prove it, but you can't disprove it either. But it's using your clairs through the process. So when I have a reading, so I have a reading coming up, I don't actually think about the reading until the actual time that I'm in the reading, just like I'm in the room with you. And once we're in the room or they're sitting here on my couch in the studio, then I'll say, let's set the intention to work together. Take a deep breath and allow me to work with you because I'm not just intruding on your personal space. It's as a professional, I'm going to ask, I'm not going to do a cold reading on you, Venus. I'm going to just say, Venus, let's work together. Take a deep breath. Maybe say your name out a few times just to get the vibration going. And just like in life, if I walked up to you as a stranger, started talking to you, be like, why is this guy talking to me? The spirit world is the same way. And the way I visualize it is almost like a red light turning on in the spirit world or a lighthouse that starts broadcasting the signal to say, hey, Mark's open, ready to work. Who wants to come close to me to give me information for this person that's maybe trying to help heal from their grief or their loss, or they need some sort of, information to help them move on in this life. And then from there, your clairs will be triggered. And I may start to see something here with my clairvoyance. I may start to feel, and what I'll do is I'll actually, I got an EMF meter set up off camera here, but I'll use it for my readings too. And I'll say, just keep an eye on this because if that fluctuates, that's measurement of energy. And energy is how they work, energy, frequency, and vibration. And it's not with the Hollywood movies, at least my experience. It's not like The Sixth Sense, which I love that movie, but I don't see them in all of their trauma. Like the person doesn't come to me and, they're all covered in blood. It's not that scary. It's not at all like that. And you can see the spirit world one of two ways, objectively and subjectively. So objectively here or subjectively here. And a lot of times I'll see them subjectively in my mind, and they may be a younger version of themselves, or they may be showing me something. And that's where your communication then starts to unfold. And then what I'll do is I'll ask the person I'm doing the reading for, you become the triangle. We call it the mediumship triangle. So you've got the medium, the sitter, and the spirit world. And in order for the triangle to be successful, I need the sitter to say, do you understand this? And they'll say either yes, no, or I'm not sure. They're not allowed to feed me information because then I'm not doing my job because you're giving me the information. But I'll say, if you and I are working together, I say, Venus, do you understand a mother to step forward? I'm just using this as an example. I'm not tuning in. But would you understand a mother to step forward or a mother's love? Now, this could be your actual mother. This could be your mother-in-law. This could be your grandmother who was like a mother to you. So it's my job to understand who I have coming forward to introduce themselves to me as a stranger because I've never met your mom before. And so what you want to do is then develop the relationship and the trust of that triangle to say, okay, I've got your mother here in spirit. She's talking about the necklace that you're wearing or the necklace that she used to wear in life and that she sees that you wear that you still wear it to this day. Do you understand this? And you're going to tell me either yes, no, or I'm not sure. And the reason you say I'm not sure is because sometimes some of the best evidence comes after the reading that you go validate. You go home and you talk to your sister or your aunt and you're like, hey, did mom have a necklace? And they're like, yeah, duh, she wore it all the time. She gave it to you after the funeral. And you're like, so we get what's called sitter's amnesia too, where the sitter just cannot recall. But I can't tell you how many times people after reading will either email me or call me or come back for a follow-up session and say, I didn't know what you're talking about then, but the spirit will close the loop and confirmed it. And sometimes you become the medium to get the information based on asking your family and friends. So it's important to be open and don't show up with a lot of expectations because expectations will lead to self-disappointment is what I found out. But doing this is how this works. And every reading is unique and authentic and different. I haven't done a reading that's ever been the same. There may be similarities, but you start to work with your clairs. And then sometimes your clairs will lead you to other modalities like music or a poem or, hey, have you seen this movie, Terms of Endearment? Oh my God, my mom loved Terms of Endearment. Well, she's talking about, so you relate based on things that they're either giving you or showing you that you're connected to. And that's how, from my experience, that I have learned how to do this. But again, I've learned for the last several years through going to, courses and excellent mentors and traveling to other countries to understand the intelligence of the spirit world. And so it does take time to get to, it doesn't just happen overnight.
Right. That's awesome. So in those early days, what did you do? Like you were like, well, I'm talking to my brothers and like I'm seeing things differently. Like, what did you do next? What was your
Yeah. So, no, it's a great question. And I actually tell people I went to college to learn how to do this. And people are like, what? What do you mean? You went to college? So I'm going to give a shout out to my alumni here in Seattle, University of Washington. And I was actually, so this would have been 2009, 2008, 2009. I was taking graduate studies in sports medicine and human performance. It had nothing to do with spirituality, psychic, mediumship, nothing. And I was doing that because I thought I was going to be working on the sidelines as a trainer, working with emergency medicine and athletes that get injured and helping them and et cetera, et cetera. And there was a course that I was taking called Visualizations, Manifestations, and Meditations for the Professional Athlete. And it had nothing to do, like I said, with spirituality. But during the course, during the semester, we would practice and we would write different types of meditations and different type of visualizations. Like how does somebody like the great Michael Jordan, how does he get into that zone to do what he did, which is almost the impossible, but yet he does it. Or, some of the great athletes. So we would look at case studies and in medical reviews of people and the power of visualization as far as meditation and as far as manifesting. Like how do you manifest that into your reality? So this whole semester, we did different types of studies and different types of meditations. We would do a walking meditation. I remember we did a tension release where you tense up your whole body really, really tight and then take a deep breath and then release. And all of a sudden your mind would visualize something. And it's through that process that I started to, like a door opening that had been long closed, this door opened and I could actually see my brother standing in the spiritual world. Or, some people call it heaven, some people call it the afterlife, some people don't believe in that. That's fine. But for me, I started to visually see them. And then through the course, I actually started to actually communicate with them. And it really, this is the awakening process that I'm talking about. It really disturbed me from my own religious upbringing, my own learned behaviors, because, society is going to be like, what do you mean you're talking to dead people? What do you mean you're hearing voices? Well, we're going to call, I'm a child of the 70s. So if you said that in the 70s, this wagon with, two gentlemen in white coats are showing up at your front door to load you up in a straitjacket and take you off to the loony bin. And so I was really concerned about that. But then at some point, something inside me said, okay, the logical side, the analytical side, which is the left hemisphere of the brain, really started to challenge status quo and say, okay, if this is real, I want to prove if it's real or if it's BS. And so I started to take different classes, and that took me down to the Berkeley Psychic Institute in California, where I studied Intuition 101. And okay, what is intuition? I don't know what intuition is. I didn't know I'd be doing this. And then from there, that led me to the Omega Institute in upstate New York to start taking classes on basic psychic. What does the word psychic mean? Because in my mind at that time, I was thinking of the commercials that were airing at that time. There was a commercial on called 1-800-PSYCHIC-WANDA. So give you some perspective. And you can tell your future. And I'm like, well, I don't want to tell people's future. But then I learned through my education that psychic doesn't mean telling somebody their future. It's not a fortune teller, even though it gets labeled that way. Psychic means of the soul. The word from a Greek standpoint means psychostasis, which means of the soul. It has nothing to do with prediction and forecasting models. And so I was like, oh, well, that's interesting, because I obviously thought I was going to be telling people their future. And then from the Omega Institute, that led me to a college over across in England, which is north of London. It's up in Stansted. It's called the Arthur Findlay College. And it's been there long before Harry Potter was made. So some of us refer to it as Hogwarts. And I spent over a decade there studying each year, traveling abroad to spend weeks and hours of sitting in the silence, sitting in the power, visualization, meditation, understanding the historic and ancient value of mediumship that is long before you and I. It's nothing new. This would also equate back to the spiritual movement that happened in the mid 1800s with the Fox sisters in upstate New York, that actually started to develop a style of communications called rappings. And many people will know rappings. There's I got some, you have dun, 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 and then you wait for a response. It's called a haircut and a shave is the terminology for it. But these three sisters in the mid 1800s, 1849, started to develop a system because they had heard these rappings in their house and they didn't understand what it was. So it became the first form of intelligent communication, because intelligent communication is two-way, not one way. That's why people equate to seeing ghosts, but the ghost isn't talking. They're just seeing a residual energy. But when you have communication that starts transponding both ways, that becomes mediumship, because it's intelligent communication that's going both ways. And so these sisters, called the Fox sisters, developed a series of using alphabet based on the rappings. And long story short, they actually determined that there was a vagabond that had been murdered and buried in the basement of their house.
Oh,
And
wow.
Hydesville no longer resonates there. It's actually, I think it's Arcadia, New York. But they come to find out that this person had been trying to communicate to say, hey, I was murdered. I'm buried in your basement. Come dig me up and set me free. And that's a long story of it. There's more to it, but it was the first known development of an intelligent communication system. And the press got a hold of this, and the press became fascinated with this. And we're talking mid 1800s now, right? So things are still pretty tight and conservative. But what it did is it really launched the spiritual movement for intelligent communications that has made it all the way up to not just the levels of the UK government, Winston Churchill, but also as far back as Abraham Lincoln, who brought a medium into the White House. There has been a medium in the White House to try to communicate with his dead son through his wife Mary, that wanted to communicate. So there's a history of mediumship here, and that's what really had me started to explore and realize, oh, there is something to this. There is this there, and it wasn't BS. It wasn't a Wizard of Oz moment. It wasn't smoke and mirrors. There was something going on. I don't know if you heard that. I don't know what that. One of my singing bowls just resonated. But what it did is it helped me from an educational standpoint, from a logical standpoint, from a reasoning standpoint, because before that, I didn't know anything about this world. And I really had to come to terms with it over a few years of identifying, awareness, acceptance. Awakening is also, I would say, equated with acceptance of who you are. Some people will not ever accept who they are, and are scared, maybe, that fear, that false evidence appearing real. That's how I equate fear of, evolving or ascending, or that alchemy that we're talking about. And that is the awakening process, right? So change is betrayal. The change of who you are isn't a betrayal. It's your evolution if you choose for it to be.
Oh, I love that. So, I had a thought and I think I lost it. So let's say somebody is going through kind of something similar, and I have heard quite a few people like lose somebody they love and then have a spontaneous awakening. That is common. That's not what happened exactly for me, but that's definitely something that you do hear. Let's say somebody's going through something like this, and like, I love how studied you are and how much you dove into that. And what would you say to somebody who's like, well, I don't really necessarily have the money to go to a school abroad, but what can I do now to maybe understand this better or hone this skill a little bit more?
Yeah, I think that really it starts when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And we can use money as an excuse. Oh, I can't do this, I can't afford that. But it doesn't need to start with money. It doesn't need to start with going to a famous school or going to an institution, or it can really just start with yourself and just sitting for a second and setting the intention to say, you know what, I want to learn more about what's going on with me and the experiences of which I'm going through. Because it's the experiences that are opening the doors and challenging you if you accept it. We have free will and choice. That's always important to remember. That's our greatest power while we're here. And sometimes just sitting and saying, I want to learn more, and that intentions then will open up the door. And again, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And from that point, then I believe that's, Lao Tzu always talked about the journey of 1,000 miles begins with what? A single step. And sometimes people are like myself, I was ready to take that single step. But at the same time, for somebody that's maybe has been raised in a very strict religious or strict upbringing, that one step may be, a cliff to them. It may be very scary. It may be very intimidating. So taking that first step requires a lot of trust, a lot of patience, a lot of grace, and I'd say mostly a lot of courage. We call it the leap of faith, because the journey of 1,000 miles can only begin if you take that first step. So that's what I would say with that, because some people are born. I believe that everybody has intuition, and by nature, we're all empathic. We're born with empathic abilities. Just like if I yawn, it's an empathic response that maybe that you yawn or another person will yawn. That's an empathic human experience. And we are all connected. If we go outside of our physical body, we also give off a frequency of ourselves. We radiate, our own vibration. There's a great book called Hands of Healing, and it's all about working with vibrations and frequency and how much of our auric field we give off an auric field, just like Mother Earth gives off, the northern lights, right? It's the same thing with humans, or a car gives off an exhaust. Humans give off energy in a vibration. And when you realize that you're bigger than just this, physical flesh suit, then you're like, oh, okay, there is something to all of this. And, just preparing yourself and taking that courage to take that leap of faith will open up doors. Maybe not how you want it, but it's not what you want, it's what you need. And I tell people that all the time. But some of us are born naturally with these abilities. It's something else I want to add. Some people are, when I talk to people and interview, on my shows and podcasts, I'll say, did you always know that you were intuitive and you had this sixth sense or this psychic ability? And they'd be like, yeah, I was born with it. Like one of my members in my development group, she's been born with it. Like she sees the spirit world objectively. I see them objectively, and she's seen it her whole time. So you'll come into that pathway, natural abilities, but then you'll have somebody like myself that will come through it through traumatic, or it could be a near death or the loss of a family member, or something in your path that actually changes you to reopen that dormant door that's been there the entire time. And that's what it was for me. So you'll come into it naturally, or you'll come to it through life experiences. But either one, you have to choose to do it. And some people lock it down. That's why I always say, for parents that have young children that are, children are very intuitive. They don't have filters. They don't have any kind of agendas or any kind of, scope. A child up to the age of 7, the age of accountability, they're actually connecting in more ways than we can imagine, because their imagination and their connectivity is, seeing the spirit world. Oh, I saw grandma. Grandma was in my room the other night. And you're like, wait a minute, grandma's been dead for 20 years. No, she's not. She was reading to me last night. Oh, that's your imagination. That's your pretend friend. And so we lock it down with children, and then they get into the education system, and then they really lock it down. So it's no wonder we lose our abilities. But if you go back through history and education, you'll realize that we are all very intuitive and choose to be bigger than ourselves and connect to something bigger ourselves. And Nikola Tesla put it the best way, I'm paraphrasing. But if you want to unlock the secrets of the universe, you start to think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. And that's why children are very, very gifted and intuitive. It, a lot of times it just gets shut down by either society, the education system, or their parents. So if your child is telling you something, maybe have an open perspective and listen to them.
Yeah, I love that. Well, you were talking about when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I do know that you offer readings, and I would love I'm kind of curious, what kind of readings do you offer? Are you mediumship readings? Is that what I've understood, or is there something else?
So yeah, so let's cross that bridge, because a lot of times you'll have people that are intuitive that are just psychic, which they're good. And so psychic, if we separate psychic from medium, they're different. They're different aspects. Psychic is working with somebody on their life and their current. Like I could be looking at you and say, "Oh, Venus, I see your auric field, and there's a lot of color going on," or I feel like your career, or your relationship, or you're about to move. This is more based on your journey of what's going on with you and the psychic. The mediumship then becomes, like I said, bringing. I don't know why I keep bringing your mom through. I'm sorry if she's here. Not.
It's probably my grandmother. Yes.
Then mediumship becomes, you start to connect with those that lived a physical life and went through death. Now, this is different than angels or ascended masters or your spiritual entourage, right? Those, I can't get proof of life through those concepts. I believe in them, but mediumship is connecting to someone that lived a physical life. Again, friend, family member, fur baby, they all live. That's mediumship. So all mediums, and this took me a while to really agree with, because I didn't always agree with this, but all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums, right? And so if you go to my website, marclainhart.com, or internet search Intuitive Prospector, when you go to book a reading, there's going to be a menu. Just like you go to a restaurant, there's a menu, and I offer different readings, whether it's a 30-minute reading, a 60-minute reading. Do you want it to be online? Do you want it to be over the phone? Do you want it to be via email? Do you want it to be here in the studio? And so I give you variants to choose what you want. I also offer sound healing. So if you wanted a sound bath and a reading in conjunction with each other, I'm a certified sound healer now because I believe in the power of sound. And again, very ancient, but I offer different variances for what that person or people are looking for. And the prices are equated on my time because it's not about the money. Money helps to survive in this world because we're the only species that pays to live here. But my greatest commodity of the one account balance I don't know is my time. So my time, you're paying for my time. And then I give you the menu of what you're looking for. And then we can also always address, many times I go over in my readings. My wife gets so mad at me because I'll have a 60-minute reading and it'll be an hour and a half later. And, but I love what I do. And I love, that's the secret of life, Venus, getting paid to do what you love. And I love getting paid to do what I love, but also helping people at the same time. And again, you're just paying for my time. And so I give you that menu of what you're looking for. So
That's amazing. And so if it's on his marclainhart.com, and if he offered our listeners, if you're interested, a 20% discount. So how would they go about just send you a message, say I want a reading? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
when they book the reading all online, because I don't like to, my manager will take care of all the logistics. I just like to show up to the meeting and be like, less is more. I don't want to know anything about you. Because, there's the skeptics out there, right? I think it's healthy to be a skeptic and have a healthy, it's healthy to have that skepticism. But, with the power of the internet and Google, oh, did you research me or did you? No, my manager takes care of that. If you want the 20% discount, just say, do you use the code, the diamond within, then I'll know that somewhere, either here or another event, they saw me talking about this, and I'll give them 20% off the booking of what they're scheduling for. And then my manager handles all that, and then I just show up. So my manager takes care of everything up until this point, and then we do the reading, and then you get a 20% off, based on if they use the tagline, the diamond within. It's pretty common.
The diamond within. Okay. So remember that, the diamond within. We will put that in the comments below just so that you remember. But please take him up on that if you feel at all drawn to him. I know Marc is a wealth of information and life experience. And I love what Marc has to offer. And like I said, he's just got a servant's heart. So I highly recommend any time you get to spend with him. And thank you, Marc, for this. This has been just always so fun to talk to you. And I love how much you have to offer and how much we get to learn from you. So thank you for sharing so generously with your time today.
Well, thank you. It's always a pleasure talking with you, and grateful and humble, sharing my journey with your listeners and your followers, and continue doing what you're doing too. Right now, we need it more than ever. I know there's a lot going on in our world, and it's really easy to get into the doom and gloom and the fear. And people ask me that all the time, like, psychic, what's the future hold? Well, the best part about our future is it comes one day at a time, and we can be focused on the good things and the inspirational things in life, and being a light or a lighthouse in the darkness. I have my Gumby here, which is the wrecking ball of life, because that's what life is. And sometimes all we can do is hold on and be flexible like Gumby, but also try to do good. Try to, we can always be kind, and we can always be in service to help others. We can always smile at a stranger. And I know the times are very difficult right now, but this is also a time where your work and your journey and what you're doing, Venus, is also very important to be that lighthouse in the darkness. So you keep doing what you're doing and keep spreading that inspiration and kindness. And thank you for allowing me to be on your platform and share my journey. And we're all trying to find that diamond within and the many hidden gems all around us. So I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. And just a quick plug, we'll also put this in the comments, but he also has his own podcast called The Intuitive Prospector, correct? Yeah.
Inspired Living.
Oh, sorry. Inspired Living. Oh, right.
Yeah.
But he's the intuitive prospector.
Podcast is Inspired Living, and you can get that wherever you listen to we're syndicated now through all major platforms. And we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of different topics and a lot of great guests, including you've been a former guest. So we have a lot of fun on Inspired Living. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Marc. And thank you, everyone, for listening. Please like, subscribe, or share if you receive something from this episode. We want more people to know that they're not alone as we begin to awaken to a new reality. And if you know anyone who's having some weird stuff going on with a home, please send them to the free quiz called homeclearingquiz.com. I look forward to seeing you all next time. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye.